right, what we're going to do is to learn pieces, parts of a talk of the Rebbe, a Sichot of the Rebbe, that I actually sent you the original one, so to speak, translated into English. The original one is in Yiddish. That doesn't really talk about the soul of non-Jews. That's not the main subject of the talk. As we will see, the main subject is Abraham Avinu, Abraham, our forefather, but the objective of this class is, of course, if you can read the text by yourself, so you don't need me to read the text, so I'll teach you something you can't read. That's the whole point. That's why we meet, actually, to learn. And we will see something that, in my humble opinion, it's a very interesting understanding of the soul of a non-Jew. Where does it come from, and what does it mean, the soul of non-Jews? But in order to do this we will do at the end of the class, so to speak. I will read to you a text that is not translated, at least as far as I know. There's no such a thing as a translation of this. And that's one of the main sources in Hasidus Chabad, in the Chabad Hasidic movement, and learning and thought and so on, where you can see what is really the soul of a non-Jew. So let's go. First of all, the Rebbe talks about a very famous known story about Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu, he used to call in the name of God, and our sages don't say he called, Va'ikra. Va'ikra sham b'shem Hashem keleilam. He called there, whatever he was, in the name of God, the Lord of the world. Don't say Va'ikra, he called, ela va'yakri. He made others call in the name of God. That means that Abraham, one of his main things in life was not just to understand that there's one God and to live that and so on, but to teach it, to make others understand that there's one God, to make others know that there's only one God, monotheism and so on. There was no such a thing as Judaism. Abraham, technically speaking, was not a Jew. Judaism starts with the giving of the Torah, but this is a different subject. We're not going to touch upon that now. The point is that clearly, Avraham Avinu, he publicized all over the places where he could that there's one God. Va'ikra, no Va'ikra, no. They say Va'yakri. He made others call in the name of God. How did he do that? Our sages explain the Midrash. And they say that he used to have a tent, which actually had 4 openings to the 4 winds, so to speak, 4 directions of the world. And from wherever direction people came, and of course, it should be noted that if Abraham was not a Jew, people, whatever that means, they were also non-Jews. Of course, non-Jews, to the point, not just non-Jews, like regular people. We have to understand and put every single thing into context that these people we're talking about at least 4,000 years ago. Regular people would not know how to read and to write, and were really, really uneducated in all senses of the word. Today, regular people went to school, different levels of school, whatever, university, etc. But in those days, regular people were really, really coarse people, really, except for those who were educated and knew things. But these were the elite kings and the children of the kings and so on that had access to a, let's call it 4,000 years ago, regular education, whatever that meant. There was no schools and no nothing. So we cannot say, and this is an important point because many times people say, yeah, the Jews talk about the non-Jews and they say words. And we're talking about people 4,000 years ago, people 200 years ago, that not many things changed in all that time. Nowadays, it's completely different story. Most of the people are educated people, let's call it quote unquote normal people. But coming back to what we're talking about, Abraham had a tent, and the people used to come, these uneducated people used to come so far into idolatry they were, that they used to bow down to the dust under their feet. That's how they thought. That's the process of thinking in their minds, who's God and what's God and so on. So Abraham Avinu used to give them food and meat and wine and water and fruits and whatever they needed. And they were very happy. They enjoyed so much. And when they finished eating, and drinking and so on, they used to, okay, stand up and go. I have to go. Thank you very much for your food. And Abraham used to say, what do you mean, thank me? You have to thank God. He is the Lord and He is the Creator and blah, blah, blah. As I was explaining to you for the last 3-4 hours, Abraham was a tough guy. He used to talk and talk and talk, and always the same subject and God and this and that. Okay, different explanations and so on. And they used to say, what do you mean, God? There's no such a thing as God. God forbid. This is their level they were at. There's no such a thing as God. What are you talking about? We thank you and so on. And Abraham used to say, wait a second. If you're not going to thank God, Abraham used to teach, blessed is the Lord that we ate from him. Whatever, that what belongs to him. If you're not going to thank God, so you owe me money. This is not free. You owe me as if it was, like a lot of money, $10,000 for a piece of meat, $20,000 for the wine, $30,000 for the fruits. Wait, hey, Paha, this is a very expensive restaurant. What's going on over here? And Abraham used to say, in the middle of the desert, who's going to give you meat? Who's going to give you wine? Who's going to give you fruit? So you owe me a lot of money unless you thank God. So people saw themselves in a very, very uncomfortable situation. They used to say, bless God that we ate from him, and that's it. I don't want to see this guy anymore. Let's move on. That's what people used to do. And this is the story of Abraham. To the point, as we're going to see later, God was so happy with this behavior of Abraham that God called Abraham a partner in creation. God said about Abraham that he made his known, God's name, his name known in the whole world. Everybody knew what is God and who is God and so on. God was very happy with Abraham. However, the truth is that Abraham was forcing people to bless. Either you pay me $100,000 for the food that I gave you, or you bless. What do you do? What do you choose? Of course, just say it. What's the problem? Blessed be the Lord, whatever that means, I don't care. Blessed be the Lord, and that's it. You don't have to pay $100,000. Makes sense. So the question is, what's the accomplishment Abraham actually gained about all of this? Why was it such a fantastic thing by God? A partner in creation. What do you mean? He's forcing people to bless. They're not doing it with the whole heart. So the Rebbe brings, this is the question. The Rebbe brings a few explanations, basically 2 explanations of this thing, but the Rebbe rejects both explanations. They're not really fulfilling explanations. Why? The first one says, look, Avram did this because he was obligated to publicize about God, and everybody should know about God. So you know what? Avram used to think, according to this explanation, I'm going to do my job. I'll make people say God, whatever, unity and monotheism, whatever name it was. That's my obligation. Did I really accomplish anything? No, they don't really care, but I don't care. It's my obligation. I'll just keep my obligation. So the Rebbe rejects this explanation because it's very hard to say that the whole service of Abraham, to the point that he was called a partner to God and so on, was just like, I'll keep my obligation and that's it. I did my part. I don't care. It doesn't really sound as Abraham. Doesn't really sound like that. Another explanation given actually by the same commentary, it's a commentary on the Midrash, Yefetoya, that's the name. Another explanation is, look, Abraham did not want his house, his table, his space, so to speak, to be disgusting. And if you eat and you don't mention God, you don't talk about him, you don't think about him, it's a disgusting table. So I want my table to be nice, to be holy table. So please say God, say something about it. Monotheism, there's only one, whatever. That's what Abraham really wanted. Also, this explanation is not really fulfilling. It's not really, is this what Abraham was all about? Just say the words and that's it. They used to cheat on him, deceive him. It doesn't really make any sense. So we need to find a different answer. What was Abraham doing? In order to find an answer, the Rebbe brings in this talk 3 stories. That the first story the Rebbe himself like rejects it and says this is not really talking about the subject we're dealing with, and we will see why. The second two stories, the Rebbe brings a different idea that's going to help us reach the real quote unquote meat of the talk. What's the soul of a non-Jew? What are we talking about? What is, in other words, what level of relationship with God is available for a non-Jew? For Jews, yeah, we know we have Torah, mitzvahs, and all those things, okay? But what about a non-Jew? So this is what the Rebbe is trying to, so to speak, reach. So let's go. First story, famous story also, Parsha Shlach. The Jewish people wanted to, they were in the desert, they wanted to send spies to the land of Israel. They sent 12 spies. 10 of the 12 came back with a terrible report. It's impossible to go over there. There are giants and it's a very difficult land. And not even God, this is how the Talmud actually understands what they said, not even God can really bring us in, put us inside the land of Israel. It's impossible, impossible. Now, two of the spies said, Yoshua and Caleb, they said, yeah, let's go, we can do it, and so on. The story ended up by the Jewish people basically in the next 38 years passing away. All the men, not the women, all the men from between 20 and 60 years old passed away, died in the desert because they did not want to go into the land of Israel. And their children and the women and so on, they came in, etc. This doesn't mean that no woman passed away in the desert, of course. Elderly women and so on, they passed away. But what I mean is, there was no decree of God that this amount of people, this between 20 and 60 years, they have to pass away. By the men, there was such a decree. And they passed away every single Tisha B'Av. The 9th of Av, they used to dig their graves. They used to lay down in the graves. And some people woke up the next morning and some people didn't. And they were just buried over there. Terrible thing. And God was very angry. You can read it in the Parsha itself, Parsha Shlach, very interesting. Here's the source. And God was very angry to the point that God told the people through Moshe Rabbeinu, you are dead bodies. Even though each one of you are going to pass away in whichever year of these 38 years of traveling through the desert corresponds to you, whatever, God is going to decide and so on, but you are already dead bodies. You're not going into the land of Israel. That's it. It's enough for me. Immediately after that story, some people came to Moshe Rabbeinu and they said, we changed our mind. We want to go into the Eretz Israel, into the land of Israel. It's okay. We will go. And Moshe Rabbeinu said, too late. I'm sorry. What do you mean too late? No, let's go. We decided. Now, this is the story. They did not go into the land of Israel. They passed away and so on. But the question is, what happened over here? A few minutes before, they were saying, not even God can bring us into the land of Israel. And a few minutes later, they said, yeah, we go, let's go. What happened? What changed? And the Rebbe explains, very simple. God said to them very harsh words. You're dead bodies. That's it for you. That heat, so to speak, changed, made the spies changed their minds. Or not the spies passed away. I mean, the rest of the people changed their minds and then they wanted to go into the land of Israel. And they couldn't. Okay, that's the story. So we do see that there are certain situations in which you have to be hard and sometimes really hard, like God telling you, you're the dead body. And believe me, if God says so, that's the truth. It's not going to change. I'm sorry. God is the master over here. He's the Lord and so on. And he said, you're a dead body. That's it. That heat brought out, this is how the Rebbe explains, brought out their, in Hebrew it's called Nefesh HaElokis, their godly soul. They were Jews after the giving of the Torah. They brought it out, and that level of the soul really wants to keep and fulfill God's will, and they wanted to go into the land of Israel. So we see a heat, so to speak, breaks something and lets spread out, bring out the godly soul, and they fulfilled the will of God. They couldn't, but they won it. Interestingly, exactly the same idea is not just a story, it's a law in Torah, which is not a practical law, but it's an interesting law. Without entering into all the details because it's going to be too long, but believe me, this is the way it is. The Rambam writes this in the laws of Gittin, in the laws of divorces, chapter 2. The Rambam writes like this. What happens when a person a man does not want to divorce a woman? In Judaism, the divorce is given from man to the woman, from the husband to the wife. It's not a divorce if the wife gives it to the husband. The husband has to give it to the wife. We learned this Parshas Kiseitze. It doesn't really matter right now. The point is, what happens if a man does not want to give the divorce to the wife? She wants to get divorced. He doesn't want, and she goes to the Beis Din, to the court of law, the Jewish court of law, and so on. And the Beis Din analyzes the whole situation. And so to speak, the truth of the matter is, the best thing over here is a divorce. That's the thing. Sometimes you have to divorce. Our sages do say, just as it is a mitzvah to get married, it is a mitzvah to get divorced. Certain cases you have to do that. Okay, no problem, but he doesn't want. She wants, he doesn't want. And the rabbis, again, let's say objectively, know that this is the best for the couple, to get divorced, and he doesn't want. So after talking to him and so on, they could not convince the guy, impossible. So they hire a few, strong guys, these people that they go to the gym and they do these things, really strong guys, and they literally hit the guy, the husband, until he says, I'll give the divorce. This is the halacha, the law. Now, what's the problem over here? There's a category called get meuse. A divorce that was forced, this is the key word, forced divorce is not valid. It's invalid. Forced divorce, we don't take it. It's not valid. She's not divorced. He's not divorced, and so on. So over here, we have a problem. On one hand, you tell me a forced divorce is not valid. It's not valid. On the second hand, you tell me we hit the guy and he says, I want. Why did he say I want? Because it was forced. That's obvious. So why is this divorce, valid? And the Rambam answers a very interesting thing. Every single Jew wants to keep the will of God. No exceptions. But this guy, his Yetzer Hara, his bad inclination, is hiding from him. He's not understanding things properly. So you hit him until his Yetzer Hara, his bad inclination, evil inclination, so to speak, moves aside, goes to sleep, so to speak, and the good inclination, the soul of the person comes out, and the soul, of course, wants to give the divorce because, again, the rabbis did analyze the situation. That's the right thing to do, and so on. That's the will of God, so to speak, that this couple should get divorced. This is how the Rambam explains. The same thing happens with the spies. The spies, they were also Jews, but the Yetzer Hara, bad inclination, fears, and it really doesn't matter the explanation, Hasidic explanation of why the spies did not want to go into the Eretz Israel, the land of Israel. But the point is, something happened to them, and they didn't want to go. The spies and the people, the spies again, they passed away, but the rest of the people. Once God told the people through Moshe Rabbeinu, your dead bodies, that hit them and came out the real self, so to speak, their soul, and they wanted to go into the Eretz Israel, into the land of Israel. Too late, but they wanted to do it. But you cannot say the same thing by Bnei Noach. This is how the Rebbe rejects this story. Why? Because we do know in Tanya, Perek Beis, Perek Aleph, Perek Beis, in first chapter, second chapter, Tanya explains, non-Jews do not have a godly soul. Parentheses, bear with me. We'll explain this later. We close parentheses. But this is what the Tanya says. So you cannot explain the same thing. The story of the spies is not good enough to explain the story of Abraham. Because in the case of Abraham, they were all non-Jews. So what's this? The whole story of the spies is not good enough. So the Rebbe goes into a second story. It's in the Talmud, a very interesting story that you can learn many, many lessons from the story. There was a great rabbi. There are two versions who he really was, either Rabbi Elazar ben Rabbi Shimon or Rabbi Shimon ben Lazar. The Talmud says Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. There's a Midrash that says the other way around, but it doesn't really matter. The point is, was a great rabbi, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. Let's just keep one name, like the Talmud says. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. He was riding a donkey, coming back from yeshiva, from the school, the rabbinical school, whatever, into his city to become the rabbi of the city. And he was a great sage. I mean, really, truly, he was a big sage, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. And he was so proud riding the donkey, coming back to the city to be the rabbi of the city. And suddenly, in the middle of the way, he found an ugly man. And when we say ugly, I'll just say the story how it is in the Talmud, and then we'll see the twist that the Rebbe gives to the story. It's a very interesting twist. The Talmud doesn't say who this guy was, Jew, non-Jew, we don't know. Some do say, some commentaries say that it was Eliyahu Hanavi, the prophet Elijah, Eliyahu, whatever. But the point is, he was an ugly man. Like you looked at this man, he was a really ugly man, whatever that means. Okay, so this ugly man approached the rabbi riding the donkey, and he said to the rabbi, Shalom Aleichem, Rebbe. Hello. And the rabbi looked at this guy, and he said to him, you're so ugly. Like, you're really ugly. And he continued with this. Do all the people in your city are so ugly? Like you? It's a terrible thing. And the ugly man looked at the rabbi and said, if you think I'm so ugly, go le'uman she'asa'ani, go to the artisan that made me, God, of course, and complain, whatever. I'm not the responsible because I'm so ugly. It's not my fault. So go to the artisan that made me and complain over there. Once the ugly man said this, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar looked at the guy and said, I'm sorry. It wasn't a correct thing what I did. I'm sorry. And the man said to him, I'm not forgiving you. And this started the whole thing in the way they were walking, like the rabbi and the donkey and the ugly man, and the rabbi was asking forgiveness, and the ugly man said, no, yes, no, please, and so on. They reached the city where the rabbi was going to. And people of the city came out to receive the rabbi. Shalom Aleichem, our rabbi, our master, our teacher. So good, we're so happy. And the ugly man was saying, wait a second, to whom are you calling a rabbi? To whom are you calling teacher? This guy? I'm going to tell you what this guy did. Blah, blah, blah. It's a whole story over there. Until the people starting asking the ugly man to forgive the rabbi. And the ugly man said, okay, I'll forgive him, but I'll put one condition. He should not do this anymore. That's it. No more. Don't do this anymore. Okay, the rabbi, of course, says, yes, I'm not going to do this anymore. He entered the synagogue and he gave a lesson, a very short lesson. A person does not have to be hard as a cedar, like the wood, cedar wood. You have to be soft as a cane. You can actually move it and so on. This is what the rabbi said. There are different explanations of what the rabbi meant, either talking about the ugly guy who did not want to forgive, or talking about himself. Like, why did I talk like this to a person? I don't have to be as hard as cedar wood. This is the story, and the Rebbe explains the story in the following way. Why is this story good for us? When Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar saw this guy, now we're talking about a big rabbi, really a big one. So we cannot say that he saw like a physically ugly person and he said to him, "Wow, it's so ugly." What do you care? Who cares about the body, so to speak? Who cares about how this guy looks in his face? What Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar saw is that this guy is really ugly inside. Something is so bad inside this person. This reflects also in the outside. But the truth is that Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar was, again, a big sage. He was looking at the inside of this guy, and he was really ugly. So he told the guy, wow, you're so ugly. Let's continue with the story. As soon as this guy heard this, what's the first thing that he said? Why don't you go to God and talk to him? This is the accomplishment of Rabbi Shimon Elazar. He got it. This guy was so ugly inside, and ugly means whatever, transgressions against God and so on. That's what ugly would mean, spiritually speaking. And as soon as Rabbi Shimon Elazar hit, so to speak, the guy with the words, the guy remembered God. Ah, now you remember God. That's it. I got it. I did my job, so to speak. Then the story continues, whether he got forgiven, not forgiven, and so on. But we do see that by hitting a person, you connect the person to God. Don't try this everywhere and in any time, but whatever. This is what Rabbi Shimon Elazar saw. By hitting the person, he immediately remembered God. So we have an interesting story about hitting somebody, not physically speaking, of course, and this connects the person to God. Okay, story number 2, Rebbe Rashab. Rebbe Rashab was the 5th Rebbe of Chabad. He passed away in 1920. When did this story happen? Nobody really knows. Probably in the 1890s, around that time. The Rebbe Rashab, I'm not going to talk a lot about this, just as brief as I can, just to understand the story. When the previous to the Rebbe Rashab passed away, his father, the Rebbe Maharash, Shmuel, that was his name, the Rebbe Rashab did not want to assume the leadership of the Chabad movement. Why? Because he had an older brother, Reb Zalman Aaron. The Rebbe Rashab was not the oldest son. He had an older brother, Reb Zalman Aaron, who was also a genius in Torah. But Reb Zalman Aaron said, I'm not the Rebbe. Forget it. Our father, whatever, the Rebbe Maharash, passed away. I'm not the Rebbe here. So the older brother was not declaring himself, was not accepting to be a Rebbe, even though he taught and he gave lessons, but he did not accept clearly the leadership of the Chabad movement. And the younger brother, who actually worked as a Rebbe, because people went to him and because he gave actually discourses and so on, he would not accept the leadership because he did not want to disrespect his older brother. And this went on for 10 years. And then he finally accepted. Whatever. Now, probably, and this is my assumption, this story happened within those 10 years, where there was not really a Rebbe, but he was a Rebbe, and he had an older brother, something like that. Now, what's the story? A person came to the Rebbe saying that the story doesn't say exactly what, so I don't know exactly what happened, but he had such terrible problems, terrible problems. Nobody at all could help him except for the Rebbe. The Rebbe can help me, give me an advice, say something to me, help me. So the Rebbe received this guy. This guy poured out his soul and explained to the Rebbe what happened to him and so on, whatever the case was. And the Rebbe answered to him, I can't help you. This was the answer of the Rebbe Rashab, I can't help you. This guy left the office, the desk of the Rebbe, crying and crying. He was completely broken, crying and crying. He was sitting outside the office of the Rebbe, and it happened that Reb Zalman Aaron, the older brother of the Rebbe, was passing by and saw this guy crying and crying like a baby. So he asked him, what's going on? Can I help you? What happened over here? And the guy told him, I just went to the Rebbe with a terrible problem, and the Rebbe said that he can't help me. So I'm done. That's it. So Reb Zalman Aaron, who was the older brother of the Rebbe, had some attributions. So he went into the office of the Rebbe without asking, without nothing, just knocking the door and just went in. And he confronted his younger brother. Is this a Rebbe? What kind of Rebbe are you? This guy comes to you with a problem and you say you can't help? And this is a Rebbe. What do you mean? You're not a Rebbe. Okay, so the Rebbe Rashab, the younger brother, said to his brother, okay, call him back again. So the guy went in again, and the Rebbe effectively gave him some tikkun we say in Hebrew. He gave him some advice or whatever he needed, and the guy just left, and he was okay. Everything got fixed, so to speak. And Reb Zalman Aaron, the older brother of the Rebbe, when he heard all of this, He asked again his younger brother, I don't understand. If you were able to help him, why didn't you help him before? And if you are not able to help him, how did you help him later? I don't get it. You can or you can't. But both things at the same time? I don't understand, said the Zalman Aaron. So the Rebbe Rashav explained, look, when this guy came in the first time, and he told me his problems, terrible problems, the truth is, I was not able to help him. But when I said to him, I can't help you, that broke completely the person. Completely broken. He realized that the only thing that can help him in his life is God. Not me, not the Rebbe, not nothing. That's it. He's done. After he was broken, the second time he came in, I was able to help him. But not because I changed, not the Rebbe. The Rebbe didn't change. The guy changed. The person changed. So after being broken, completely broken, the Rebbe was able to help him. These are the three stories that the Rebbe brings in this talk. It's not so common that the Rebbe brings so many stories in talks. But whatever, these are the three stories. What's the explanation of all of these? About the stories and so on. Basically, there are two types of hitting, quote unquote, not physically speaking, people with words. Either you hit the person to bring out the good inside the person. That's the story of the spies. Or you hit a person to break his coarseness, to break the person. But you're not intending to bring out anything. You're just breaking the person because in the state where the person is found right now, it's impossible to grow. And this word coarseness, you can understand it in many ways. He's too given into pleasures of life, food, drink, or whatever. He's too given into himself, even without the pleasures of life. He's just thinking about himself. Or his pride is so high. You can understand this coarseness in many, many ways. Even in a way of he's too given to keeping the will of God because he wants the peace of Gan Eden, of the paradise or the world to come or whatever you want to call it. He's serving God, keeping the mitzvahs, whatever. He's doing what he has to do. But what's the motivation of doing that? I want to gain something out of this. That's also coarseness. So only when you break the coarseness, we see this in the story of the ugly man. We see this even clearer in the story of the Rebbe Rashab. Once you break that, it's not that something comes out. There's nothing to come out. Now the person is able to understand things in a different way, to look at the world in a different way. The ugly man spoke about God, and this Chassid realized that the only one that could really help him is God, not the Rebbe, it's God. Now, all of this works pretty nice, these two ways, by Jews, because a Jew has a godly soul. Again, Tanya, Perek Aleph, the first chapter of Tanya talks about the soul of the Jew. The second chapter of Tanya also talks about the soul of the Jew, and it talks about the soul of non-Jews and so on. But the truth is that non-Jews do not have the same soul as the Jews. So that's why the Rebbe rejected, so to speak, the first story he brought by the spies, because that story, the point of the story is to bring out the godliness in the person. Let's call it like that. So godly soul and so on. But you cannot say this by non-Jews. That's why the Rebbe brought two other stories. So by Jews, when you break the person, that brings out his godly soul. What about non-Jews? The Rebbe, the exact words of the Rebbe are like this. I'm just going to translate a very short piece. He says like this: by non-Jews, he doesn't have a godly soul, so the breaking, the hitting, and so on, spiritually speaking, and so on, can accomplish just the potential. A person now has the potential to reach the spiritual level that a non-Jew can reach. Whatever that means. We're going to learn this. It's patience. So that's why the Rebbe That's how the Rebbe explains, the story of Abraham. We still did not talk about what exactly is the soul of non-Jews and potential. What are we talking about? We're going to learn this in a minute. But let's go back to the beginning, the story of Abraham. When Abraham used to hit, quote unquote, these people asking for $100,000 in the middle of the desert for the piece of food, piece of meat, a piece of whatever, wine, and so on, that was breaking the coarseness of the person, not to bring out anything, but because there was nothing over there to bring out. There was no godly soul, but that allowed the people to incorporate all the explanations that Abraham was talking about for hours while giving the food. And now the person can at least has the power, the potential of thinking about it. Okay, I'll think about it. It's a capacity now because Abraham broke the coarseness. That's how the Rebbe explains this whole thing. Now, we could finish here. I'm not going to do that, but we could finish here. Why? Because this is basically what the Rebbe teaches in this Sicha, and that's it. But the truth is that the talks of the Rebbe basically have two parts. Part number one is like the main text, the chapters and so on. Part number two are the notes. People usually learn the text, and it's very interesting and it's very nice and blah, blah, blah. And people don't learn the notes because they're too hard. Go to this book, go to that book, go to that book, that book. Notes, for instance, just this talk has 39, which is not so much, 39 notes explaining, and some are only, some of these notes are just saying this idea is found in this particular book. But some of the notes actually bring different ideas, explaining, comparing, and so on. The Rebbe over here brings two notes, basically with the same idea. I don't know why exactly. He should have said, look at the note, the previous note. And I'm going to read to you this idea inside. This is found in a book by the Mitteler Rebbe, the second Rebbe of Chabad, where over there, it talks about the soul of non-Jews directly. So again, what's going on over here? In the main text of the talk, the Rebbe did not say exactly what's the soul of a non-Jew. He didn't talk about it. He just said a non-Jew does not have a godly soul like the Jew. That's all he said. And he sent us to look at other texts, which we're going to learn. In those texts, they talk directly about the soul of non-Jews. In order to understand this text, let's go a little bit of background, so to speak. In many places in Hasidus, in Kabbalah, it's explained that there are basically three levels or three expressions that give life, through which God gives life to every single thing in the world. Everything. Either a thing is Kedusha, holiness, or Klipas Noiga. I'll explain what this means in a second. Bright shell, that would be the translation of the words. Or Klipos Temeos. There are three levels over here. This third level actually has three levels, and so on. Impure shells. What does it mean, shell? What's a shell? A shell is like a covering, something that covers something else. Suppose you have an orange. So you have the main part of the orange, which is inside, and then you have a shell on the whatever in Spanish we say cáscara. What would be the exact word? Would be peel. The peel. Okay, peel. Whatever. So you have the orange and you have the main part and the peel. Okay. Peel could have two functions. Function number one, in the beginning of the creation, before the sin of the first man and so on, the peel, actually, fruits also had peels, but the peel was a protective peel for the fruit. It was not something that hide and conceal the fruit. No, it was a protective thing. After the sin, the peel became a way of hiding what's inside the fruit. So now you see the peel, and you don't know if the fruit is really good or not. You just see the peel. And if you actually, most of the fruits at least, you actually taste the peel, it's really bitter. It's not so good as the fruit at least. So that's the idea of in Hebrew, klipa. Klipa is a shell. But over here, very important thing that most of the people make a mistake while learning this, a shell, like a peel, whatever, it doesn't mean that we can take it out and see the fruit. That's not what we're talking about. No. We're saying that there's a level of concealment. What is this concealment all about? Either it's a complete and absolute concealment, and the only thing you can reach is impurity. Example, in Torah, for Jews, not for non-Jews, it's forbidden to eat pork. Okay, it's forbidden to eat pork. Why? I don't care. I don't know. It's forbidden to eat pork. God doesn't like the pork, whatever. But what does that mean? That the godly energy that comes from God into this animal comes from klipa tmeya, from these levels of shells, of peels that are impure. It's an impure animal. Nothing bad with it, nothing wrong with it. It's just the Torah doesn't want the Jews to eat it. Non-Jews can eat pork, is not a problem. There's only one midrash over there that says that God is going to give reward to the non-Jews that don't eat pork, but it's not like an halachic thing. It's not like a legal thing that non-Jews cannot eat pork. No. Non-Jews can eat pork, whatever. Jews cannot eat pork. Why? Again, spiritually speaking, because its livelihood is from the impure peels, klipa, shells, whatever you want to translate it. And then you have things that are kedusha, holiness, like holy objects, a Sefer Torah, the book of the Torah, rolls of the Torah, a tefillin, and so on, mezuzah. And then you have things that are a neutral level. What does that mean, a neutral level? Let's take a cow. Okay. Is a cow holy or unholy? No, a cow is not holy and it's not unholy either. A pig, a pork, we could say it's unholy for the reason I just explained, the livelihood, the energy that comes from God and so on. But a cow is not unholy, but it's not holy either. Now, if you slaughter the cow properly, as according to the law, it's called shechita, and you take out the blood from the meat and you prepare it and so on, and you say a blessing while you're eating it, or before eating it and after eating it. So this energy that was a neutral energy, not good, not bad, or exactly the same idea, but it's just with different words, good and bad, evil and good, mixed within this thing. When you do things properly, again, you slaughter according to the law and so on, so that becomes kedusha. This thing that's called klipas noiga, it's an intermediate level that could be raised when you use it properly in the service of God, or it could be brought down when you don't use it properly in the service of God. That's called klipas noiga. It's a mixture of, let's say, good and bad. That's what klipas noiga means. Now, having these ideas in mind, let's learn a small piece, because actually it's not so big, it's not so long, of a work of the Mittler Rebbe. The Mittler Rebbe was the second Rebbe of Chabad, one of the sons of the Alter Rebbe, who founded the Chabad movement, and he wrote and spoke so much. He could be for 15, 16 hours talking and writing and talking. It's amazing ideas, just really long ideas. So what we're reading is basically a book that he wrote. It's called Kuntres Ispilus. Kuntres Ispilus means like a work on excitement. Emotional excitement. How does it work really from the head into the heart? And this interaction, hundreds of pages just talking about this idea. In the middle of all of that, he's discussing what happens when a Jew, later we will reach a non-Jew, what happens when a Jew actually does an act that is not so, it looks like a good act, but it's not so good. It's not really so good, but it looks like a good act. For instance, when there's a thief, the Gemara says, the Talmud says a very famous expression, a thief, before entering the place wants to steal, he asks help from God. Now, wait a second. God said not to steal, and this guy is stealing. Okay, so if you believe in God, don't steal. And if you don't believe in God, why do you ask help from God? You're nuts. Before stealing, he asks help from God. Doesn't make any sense. So the Mittler Rebbe explains, look, there's there's a level in which the godly soul is so concealed by the animal soul and the animalistic desires and passions of a person that the godly soul cannot express itself. But it's there. It's never gone. So this thief, before stealing, he does have a godly soul. Whatever, if he's a Jew, he does have a godly soul. So the godly soul, it's trying to express itself. So he's asking help from God. But he's stealing. He's not acting properly, but the desires are there. The emunah, the faith is there. It's never gone. And then he brings another example. What happens if a person gives tzedakah, charity? But he gives tzedakah with the objective, and he says it, he actually pronounces, verbalizes, with the objective that God is going to heal my son. My son, God forbid, is sick. I want my son to heal. I'm going to give tzedakah in order for my son to be healed. Now, we do know that the mitzvahs, service to God, is not about having benefits. No, you got it wrong. But this guy, that's what he's doing. He's giving tzedakah in order for somebody else to heal his son or somebody else, whatever. And the Talmud calls this guy a tzaddik gomur, a complete tzaddik. So it's crazy. Wait a second. He's saying that his motivation is not really pure. He's expecting a reward. He's expecting a benefit out of giving tzedakah, out of doing a mitzvah. So why is this guy called a tzaddik gomur? Because he has a nefesh elokis. He has a godly soul inside of him. So when he gives tzedakah, is the godly soul expressing itself? But when he says, I want a benefit out of this, it's his animal soul trying to conceal the godly soul and so on. This is how the Rebbe explains this little part. Now, immediately comes up a question that he brings in parentheses, very small parentheses. And we're going to read the parentheses, and then we're going to go to an explanation that was wrote by this Chassid of Rebbe, Hillel Paritcher, who was a half Rebbe. That's the description of this guy. It's a very interesting character. He wrote a commentary on this book of the Rebbe that we're learning right now. So we're going to read the Rebbe's words, and he's going to explain a little bit more. Drops, not really so much. But let's go. So what happens with a Jew? We explained. Very nice. His godly soul is expressing in his good acts. What happens with a non-Jew? So he brings two ideas, very clear and powerful ideas. If you're talking about an idolater, he calls it oivdei kochavim, those people that used to serve the stars. These are the words of the Rebbe. So if you don't really like it, I'm sorry. This is what the Rebbe says. Idolaters, I'm just reading what he says. They only act for their own benefit because their souls come from klipos tmeyos, from this level, completely impure, nothing good there. Don't talk to me about a mixture of good and bad. No, sir, I'm sorry, only bad. That's talking about idolaters. And he continues. However, if you're talking about Hasidei u'moisakad moinim, literal translation. If you're talking about the pious of the nations, of the ancient nations, that's a different story. And he doesn't say exactly what's the story. It just says, no, wait a second, let's make a distinction over here. We spoke about the Jew, and the whole book is about the Jew, and we're not going to learn it, of course. It's not the point of the class. And he made a parenthesis. Oh, wait a second. What happens with a non-Jew? And he says, okay, we have two categories over here. Category number one, oivdei kochavim, idolaters, pagans, and so on. Forget it. That's complete impurity. Nothing good comes out of that. Even if they do a good act, and you see it's a good act, it doesn't come from a good place. It comes from a bad place inside this person. A benefit, whatever, something he's expected to gain out of this. 100% of the times. This is about idolaters. And then he says, wait a second, there's an exception. By the non-Jews, Hasidei u'mosoilam, pious between the nations. And what does that mean? What are they? So let's go to the commentary of Hillel Paritcher. I'm not going to read the whole thing because he explains a little bit more what we said before about giving tzedakah and the Jew and the soul. Very nice. We're not dealing with this. Let's go to the parentheses. He explains like this. The souls of the Oivdei Kochavim, idolaters and pagans and so on, that the good things that they do and the acts of kindness that they do is not to fulfill the will of God. You see, he's using different words. Explain a little bit more, drops of wisdom added to what the Mittler Rebbe said. The good deeds that they do is not because of godliness. It's not because they want to do what God says. And not because they have mercy on somebody else, like I'm going to give you money, help you, and so on. No, not at all. Because by nature, they're cruel. And they only act for their own benefit. For instance, they act in order to pride themselves. I gave tzedakah, I have a lot of money, whatever. Because the source of their souls is, as explained before, Shalosh Klipas Admeis, these three levels, whatever. Within this third level, there are three levels. That's why it's called three levels, but whatever. Within this level, their souls comes from this level of Klipas Admeis, impure peels, shells, whatever. Which is not the case with Hasidei Yumoisa Oilam, the pious among the nations. Their soul, it is an addition also to the Mittler Rebbe, their soul comes from Klipas Noiga. As it's known, he closes the parentheses, he continues with the Jew. So we do see now, and this is based in the Zohar, it's not an invention of the Mittler Rebbe or the Rabbi Paritcher, this is based on the Zohar. There's a whole letter of the Rebbe, which is actually, if I'm not mistaken, is in the YouTube channel also. You can learn it and understand it. It's very interesting, but the Rebbe brings the same ideas. It's not just no novelty over here, but it just brings it from the Zohar. It explains exactly the same thing. The souls of a Ben Noach, Bas Noach, B'nei Noach, Noahites, or whatever you want to call it. I don't care. To me, it's everything the same. Doesn't make any sense to make a difference between one name and the other. But whatever you call it, the souls of non-Jews that keep the message of Judaism for non-Jews, the 7 commandments and universal mitzvahs and ramifications and so on, it's a different soul. Point. It's not the same soul as the soul of a regular pagan and idolater and so on, no Jew. It's a different soul. The truth is, it's a different soul than the Jew's soul also. Yes, it is. But going back to the words of the Rebbe that I explained before, at least they have the capacity of reaching godliness, connecting to godliness. And the interesting idea of this bright shell and peel and so on is that it is a mixture of good and bad. By the impure shells, there's no good over there. Nothing. Just have to be completely rejected. By Klipas Noiga, in this bright level in the middle, this neutral level, so to speak, there is good mixed within the bad. So we have to distinguish and we have to separate what's good, what's bad, and so on. But there is such a thing. There is good. So if a person asks, what's the soul of a non-Jew? You have to ask yourself, what kind of non-Jew are we talking about? Furthermore, over here, there's no information about this, and I did not see anywhere written about how it works, but it might be that a pagan, idolater, and so on, non-Jew decides that, for whatever reason, usually intellectual reasons and so on, because he studied and looked here and there, heard classes and so on, that there's only one God. It might happen, of course. So what happens with this person? Before, he was a pagan guy. I don't know, in India, they bow to rats and cats and monkeys and I don't know, all kinds of weird things. And they think it's God. I don't know. The cow is a God, whatever. So what happens if a person like that, complete pagan, today, he decides that there's only one God. Forget it. I was mistaken. I'm going to leave all of this. I'm going to learn Torah and so on and blah, blah, blah. What happens with this guy? What about the soul? So either, again, I did not see this written anywhere. Either you have to say that It was there from before. It was just covered under a lot of layers of coarseness and so on. Or another possibility, God injected, so to speak, this soul into this person at the moment that the person realized and whatever, God opened his eyes by giving him or her, whatever, the gift of having this special soul, special higher level. Again, with this is only brought down in the notes of the talk of the Rebbe, and we learned it inside, so to speak. So you can imagine if one of these notes was just this whole thing, what about the other notes? The other notes do not talk about the non-Jews and so on, other subjects, but the same thing happens with every single one of the notes of the Rebbe. He mentions an idea and it just continues, but wait a second, there's a number over there, a small number, that is taking you somewhere else. It's a whole world. This somewhere else where you go and learn, it's a whole world. Ooh, now I have a deeper understanding of what's going on. So hopefully we learn how to take advantage of it and how to connect to God through this part, this component of good that there is inside every single Ben, Bas, B'nai Noach, whatever you want to call them. Hopefully we develop this relationship with God and we work in order to make this world, simply speaking, a better world, in order to bring down the presence of God and bring down Mashiach speedily in our days.